This episode is sponsored by Seats One, the all-in-one platform supporting universities such as Kingston, Manchester and Roehampton. From tracking attendance and student engagement to ensuring compliance and optimising campus space, Seats One gives higher education teams the tools they need to stay ahead. With AI-powered engagement scores, powerful analytics and automated early alerts, Seats One helps staff identify at-risk students faster and act sooner. If you're looking to make data-driven decisions, improve financial outcomes and streamline operations, visit seatsoftware.com to learn more. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Steph Glen. Steph has been a higher education professional since 2007, initially working her way through a series of progressively senior roles in timetabling, including nearly 10 years at the University of Nottingham, and since December 2024, holding the newly created strategic role of Head of Teaching Space Operations at UCL, the UK's largest university. In this episode, I find out from Steph about the significant impact she's had within her career so far to improve the student experience and the strategic focus she places on building collaborative relationships with colleagues to help break down some of the challenges that exist in HEIs about use of space. Steph, thank you for being my guest today and welcome to Job Shadowing HE. You're Head of Teaching Space Operations at UCL, a post you've held for around 6 months since December 2024. Can you give us an overview of your role?
Hi, Susanna. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. This is a new role for UCL, and I'm pretty sure it's unique in the UK from what I can gather. So what I do is I look after and manage all teaching spaces at UCL. Now, they are defined as essentially bookable spaces. So lecture theatres, seminar rooms, PC rooms, and I'm moving into unowned social spaces. It's a varied role with a few key components. Firstly, understanding what we have and what we need at the present time and managing any refurbishments or minor works. And secondly, working on teaching spaces strategy and where we want to be in the future. Now, I say I look after these spaces because from my experience and talking to a variety of universities, it seems pretty standard that labs have lab managers and departmental space is owned and cared for by departments, but centrally bookable spaces, they don't really have an owner. And often timetabling take it on as a task, but without budget or resource to manage it. And that's how the spaces can actually start to feel left behind. So I, at UCL, am adopting these spaces, I'm caring for them, and I'm making sure that they do what they need to do.
We're going to talk a bit more in a few moments about the role and a bit more about what you're doing. But first of all, I just want to ask a bit about your background. You started your career in higher education in 2007 when you became an academic timetabler at Sheffield Hallam University. You held that post for just over 7 years, and then you moved to the University of Nottingham, where you took on a series of progressively senior roles in timetabling. Now, timetabling is probably one of the toughest jobs behind the scenes in any higher education institutions because of the complexity of the task, but also because everyone just wants the timetable to work for them. So I'm interested to know what attracted you to remain in that timetabling environment in that earlier part of your career? And what were the type of skills that you developed within it?
It is a tough job, and I'm pleased that you said that because it is tough. Because timetablers do get some stick. It is seen that the timetablers are the ones who, for example, decide if you can take your child to school or if you have to go into breakfast club. They can decide if you can spend a full day on research or if you have to plan your research around your teaching activity. And it really isn't the case that the timetablers have that power and they are choosing to do this to you. You're right, it's the task. It is so complicated, particularly when you add in huge levels of module choice or overworked estate. The timetablers are doing their absolute best to satisfy all requirements, but in such a short window of time. It's from curriculum confirmation to the start of session. They've got a hard deadline. Those students are coming. So they've got to get it done in that window. So many people say that to be a timetabler, you need to be good at puzzles. And it helps. But you also have to be a person who could handle a jigsaw with a missing piece or a Sudoku with an unachievable time limit. You're never going to get perfection, and you have to be okay with that. I think that's what kept me in timetabling. The people are magnificent, and timetabling conferences are an absolute joy because it's full of quite a rare breed of people who are thrown together. But in truth, it's quite a lonely job where you have the potential to be bashed on a daily basis because of this perception that you are deciding if your child has to go to breakfast club. And as the leader of that team, you have to recognize it and empathize with them and do your best to get out there to the university to bring about the understanding that a timetable is the byproduct of the curriculum, the estate, and the time frame. Now, I've had the opportunity to work with some incredible mentors in my time. And one once said to me that my job was 50% PR. And she was right. Once I went out there and I built up that profile, and the university senior leaders not only understood our plight, but they learned what we could deliver in terms of data, life was much easier and much more fun. So in terms of skills, you asked for skills, I think maybe puzzle geek who doesn't seek perfection, who can empathize with a very thick skin, who can boss that PR role.
Your interest in teaching space broadened out at an early stage in your career, and in 2014, you successfully completed an MBA alongside your day job, and that MBA included a dissertation on classroom design and space planning in higher education. What was your motivation for doing that, and what were your main findings?
It was a specialist MBA in facilities management because I was working at the time on the joint venture between Sheffield Hallam and the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield. And that's what kind of lit the fire under me for bringing people together to make the most out of spaces available, that shared space, and the impact it has on the student experience. Like, we were teaching students on the same running track that Jessica Ennis-Hill was running. You know, she was over there, we were over here. Incredible experience for those students. And that collaborative working of what you can achieve when you put people together has always been a passion of mine because it just makes sense. So as I worked through my MBA, I realized that I had this wealth of data on teaching spaces at my fingertips. And I was desperate to see the university get more out of this data in the teaching estate. So I just ran with it. My main findings were really obvious when you think about it. Flexibility. Everybody teaches differently. Even if they teach the same subject, they teach it differently. If you look at high schools where teachers have got their own classrooms, they have that luxury of having their own classroom. Are they all set up the same? No. So why in universities are academics expected to just accept the room they are given for that particular session on that particular day and make it work? There isn't the space for everyone to have their own room, but there are a lot of assumptions made around HE classrooms. And it's the responsibility of the people designing the room to make it as flexible as possible to allow for those different teaching styles. It's really quite simple when you think about it. My second major finding was inclusivity. So this was in 2014. Let's put that caveat out there. And it was a time when having a space for a wheelchair in a room was good enough. That box was ticked. But again, if you look at the activity happening in the room, it's not good enough. That wheelchair user has just the right to be able to interact, get involved with group work, and feel as though they're involved as everyone else. So inclusivity needs building into classroom design from the start. Luckily, we're 11 years down the line now, and inclusive environments is so much more ingrained. But back then, it wasn't really thought about.
You'd done the MBA and then you were at Nottingham. And in that final phase of your time at Nottingham, you were seconded from your role as head of timetabling to be a senior project manager, where for 3 years you ran a programme of work on timetabling and teaching infrastructure improvements. What was it like to transition from being a head of service to a senior project manager role in terms of the type of work that you were doing?
That was hard. It was really tricky. I was managing a team of about 20 at one point, and my role was basically firefighting, people management, and PR. And then all of a sudden, I was plucked out of this role by the wonderful Stephen McAuliffe, who was the deputy registrar at Notts at the time. And he had this vision for timetabling. And he said, look, you don't have time for anything strategic. You are just constantly firefighting. Hand that baton onto someone who will keep the boat afloat and come work with me on this timetabling vision. You can have one person come along with you for project support. So it was a massive change. So I went from management, firefighting, and PR. I kept the PR, to be fair, to improvement projects, incremental improvements, data, and going out there with this amazing presentation that Steve and I worked on, where we played higher or lower, such as module combinations for this program. Are there more module combinations than there are miles to the moon? And everyone was like, obviously there's more miles to the moon than there are combinations of this program. Actually, there wasn't. There was 5.4 million module combinations. And it was going out and getting this information, using that data and getting that information across to say, let's look at the way that we design our curriculum and the impact on the timetable. So it was a huge learning curve for me going from that role to that role. But I grabbed it with both hands, and he let me run with it. He trusted me, which was amazing. It was a risk. We had a lot of eyes on us. Our project board was chaired by Sarah Spate, who was the Pro Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning at the time. She was ridiculously supportive. The board, it consisted of Associate Pro Vice Chancellors from every faculty, plus student union reps. They just trusted us.
And reflecting back on that 3-year period, what would you say were your main achievements in the project? And were there any that were particularly important to you?
We did a lot of incremental improvements. I've got 3 that really stand out. The first huge achievement was a whole new room booking system. So room bookings tends to fall under timetabling, and it's possibly the most controversial job in a university because you get to decide who gets what room and when. And in a room bookings role, which tends to be an administration role, you tend to get shouted at more than actually the timetablers do. And we had a really, really old room booking system at the time. And what with freedom of speech and the need to gather guest speaker information coming in, the increase in student demand for booking rooms, the old system just wasn't cutting the mustard. So me and my one project support person designed, configured, and implemented a whole new system in 6 weeks. So that's the quickest the software supplier has ever done it. And for the size and complexity of UON, it was absolutely amazing achievement that we were absolutely shattered at the end. Another one was it took a lot longer. It was requirements gathering and the procurement of new timetabling software. To move timetabling forward at Notts, given the constraints, it was a really important task. I had this vision to shake up how timetabling was done. Timetablers are specialists at scheduling and they need to do what they're great at. But again, I got my head into the data and I could prove that the timetablers spent 11% of their working year scheduling. The rest of the year was data gathering, data entry, or making change requests. And so I was just like, this is ridiculous. We need a piece of software that does the data gathering for us. It enters the data for us. And at the other end of the process, if academic Joe Bloggs wants to change that session to be academic Jane Smith, they can do that themselves. And then put that focus, that timetabler's time, onto the scheduling task, which is when you can start thinking about things like student centricity and working with staff on staff availability and that sort of thing. So I didn't get through to implementation. I went off to UCL before we got there. But an achievement was making sure that we got the right software for the university before I went. And I am still to this day absolutely convinced that that software will do that job. But I have a favourite, and I'm actually quite emotional and passionate about the best thing that I did in that role, which was I am one for challenging the status quo. And you've probably heard, I think everyone's heard about the hard line on Wednesday afternoon teaching in UK HE. And at Sheffield Hallam, I was a specialist sports timetabler and I absolutely was wedded to this no teaching on Wednesday afternoons. But I went to Notts and not everyone was in sport. I was like, oh, it's a massive waste of space not teaching on Wednesday afternoons. That's 10% of the week that you're wasting not using that space. But then COVID came about. No sport happening. Right. I'm going to use up every bit of space that there is and I'm having Wednesday afternoons. And it was allowed. And after COVID, and we were getting back into the norm, went to the board and said, look, I quite fancy doing a pilot on this. I'm not going to force anyone to teach on a Wednesday afternoon or to teach or learn on a Wednesday afternoon, but I'm going to put the option out there. And so we came up with some rules like lab groups. If there were 4 different lab sessions and you had to go to one of them could have been on a Wednesday afternoon. Seminars, if there were 8 seminar groups, 2 of them could be on a Wednesday afternoon. And the students had to have the freedom to move in and out. There had to be space in the other groups for the freedom to move in and out. So we did that as a pilot across the university just to look at how it worked. Of the students that moved in and out, 52% moved out, quoting things like sport and jobs and that sort of thing, fine. But 48% of the moves were in to Wednesday afternoon. And that was for things such as carers, people that needed to work, people that needed to drop their kids off at school. The aging population of the student now isn't focused on sports on a Wednesday afternoon. But also, Notts is a big elite athlete university. And I was seeing elite athletes moving into Wednesday afternoon so they could be in the pool in the mornings. They could be on the river on a Friday afternoon rowing their boats. So it was a really interesting pilot that actually started off as a Steph wants to use the space, but moved into this inclusive programme. We are taking care of carers and elite athletes and all that sort of thing. And it was incredible. So that's the one I'm most proud of.
Looking Tagging on to where you are now, you moved to UCL in December 2024 when you took up the post, as we said earlier, of Head of Teaching Space Operations. Now, Nottingham, where you were previously, is a large university with just under 35,000 students. But according to its website, UCL is the largest on-site provider in the UK, with over 50,000 students, 94 academic units across 11 faculties, with a broadly balanced undergraduate and postgraduate student population. Now, I know from what you've said so far, you're clearly someone who likes to get things done. What's the strategic backdrop to the work that you're doing or will be doing at UCL?
Yeah, it's big. It was a bit of a surprise, and it's in the centre of London, so it's big and different. So UCL are exceptional at research, and they're exceptional at so many other things. That there's been a notable shift towards, right, we're amazing, but there are pockets of where we can improve. And teaching spaces is one of them. So I've been brought in, brand new role. Governance is getting in place. We've got working groups, we've got boards, we've got a new, as of 2 weeks ago, teaching spaces strategy officer who I'm working really closely with. And it sort of feels like UCL is setting up a chessboard ready for the UCL Estates Vision 2050 to get going. That's coming really soon, that vision document, and it's really exciting.
And you've gone into this newly created role, as you say. What's been your focus so far in your first 6 months in post?
I've got 4 focuses at the moment. My first job really is to understand what we've got. So I am running a full audit of our, I think, 426 teaching spaces. And that includes everything from counting the chairs, colour of the walls, does the AV work, even down to measuring the height of the window in the door for inclusive environments. Because if we don't know what we've got, we haven't got a grasp of where we need to go to. So that's focus number 1. Focus number 2 is to clip the low-hanging fruit. I'm refurbishing the spaces that are absolutely crying out for some love and attention. Focus number 3 is to take on the annual summer refurbishment programme. It's a collaborative effort, and each year we strip about 20 rooms back to the bones. And us in Estates work with IT, AV, space planners, timetabling, inclusive environments to deliver a joined up project to provide about 20 teaching spaces each year, fully refurbished over the summer, ready for teaching in September. So that's the one that I've got my teeth into at the moment. And then I think adding together my low-hanging fruit and the summer refurbishment programme will have done 9 lecture theatres by September. So that's one a month. And then my final focus is to let people know that I'm here. I'm here, I'm nice, I can do stuff, I'm approachable, come and talk to me.
You've had significant experience of managing change in your career so far, as you talked about with the work that you did at Nottingham. And your role of Head of Teaching Space Operations at UCL will be heavily focused on change. You've got that short-term change that you've just been talking about, but that longer-term change as part of the strategy. Based on your experience elsewhere and from what you're seeing at UCL now, what approach will you be taking to get buy-in to the changes you'll lead? And how does that work in an institution the size of UCL?
A lot of your guests talk about the importance of the network. And it's so true, particularly with the size and scale of UCL. And I have really noticed it in the last 6 months. I think being at Nottingham for 10 years and having that network, and then coming here and I'm like, oh, I don't know anyone. So that's a really big one for me, is getting out there and finding that network of people. And there are some incredible people at UCL. So I'm really excited about that. But for me, it's customer feedback. And not just doing diligence, but actually listening to it and acting upon it. So far, done a couple of things at UCL to say, Steph's here and this is how it's going to work. So following last year's summer refurbishment, I mean, I wasn't there for that, but I put together a targeted questionnaire to, I know you've been in this room, and from the timetabling data, and I know you've been in there, can you please give me some feedback on, do you like this room or not? And how have we done and what can we change? That got over 1,000 responses, which was amazing. So working on that, but also we did something that was a bit of fun, which was the first ever UCL's Chair Choice Challenge. I spend a lot of money every year on chairs for classrooms because they, break and they get dirty and stuff. And what boggled my mind is that we've never asked the students what you like to sit on. People have just been out and bought the chair, or they've paid somebody to buy a chair. And so I just hired out part of the student centre, got a vast array of chairs, and just said, come and sit on a chair and vote for your favourite. And then I will put them in the classrooms. And it got such an amazing response from the students saying, we've never done anything like this before. And I was like, yeah, tell me what colour. I can have it in any of these colours, the upholstery. And they were like, oh, this is so entertaining and so amazing. And I actually got asked, am I a research project? I was like, no, I'm an estates. They were like, really? This is amazing. This is actually going to happen. I was like, yeah, it is. It's coming soon to a chair near you. So I think my approach to buy-in is very getting out there and actually acting on the feedback that I get. And hopefully, fingers crossed, my approach will work.
And picking up on that, I mean, what would you hope to achieve, other than the vast array of chairs, within the next 18 months? And what would you say are the dependencies for making that happen?
Everyone I've met at UCL has said it takes at least 18 months to get to the place because it is so different. So that's my first goal in the next 18 months, to be settled in, know what I'm doing and not feel quite so new. But I'm already looking at summer 26 and how we can improve that summer programme. I want to link in with other works so it joins up this collaborative approach. I mean, there isn't any point in having an amazing new lecture theatre that's all been stripped out and look at all the cool stuff it's got now if you can't find it, or the toilets next to it are horrible, or it's got a mucky corridor. So I'm going to build on that collaborative piece and take it further, work on other summer works that are going on and see if we can join together. Dependencies are really selling that vision and that PR piece, getting people to work with me and saying, look, come and work with me, we can do some cool stuff. But also we've got to consider student numbers. We're in the same predicament as other universities at the moment. We have absolutely no idea what's going to happen with the fluctuation between undergraduate and postgraduate. Where's that going to take us? So we need to be ready to respond to the needs and the requirements of the changing student population and the teaching we will be delivering because of that, however that may be.
You've had significant experience over what's nearly a 20-year period in the HE professional world, firstly in timetabling and now in the broader area of teaching space. Looking more broadly across the sector, to what extent would you say that timetabling and thought about learning spaces is becoming a more embedded part of designing the curriculum and the student experience? Or can it still be an afterthought in some parts of the sector?
Honestly, I think it's getting there. Much more now than ever before, but I suspect more by force of hand than anything. Universities are having to look at efficiencies, and curriculum design, teaching delivery, and space is a huge part of that. Space is a massive cost to universities, and we need to prove that we are using it efficiently by scheduling the teaching delivery to the most efficient use of space, whilst maintaining academic integrity. I'm not having timetabling is dictating my pedagogical approaches. No, we need to maintain our academic integrity. But it is a tough ask of our academic community. In particular, And it is going to take huge amounts of work and change, but that doesn't mean it's not achievable.
And as you say, it is achievable, and you said we are getting there. I mean, how do you think we need to move forward even further in the sector to have that focus on space? Is it through technology? Is it through work of sector bodies? Is it cultural change within our institutions? Is it where we position timetabling or space development teams organisationally in institutions, or is it something else?
That's a huge question with no answer from me, I'm afraid. Technology can take us a long way. There's software now that can take your curriculum design, move it into timetable planning, do some modelling, and churn out space usage. You know, all these reports at the end. And that was unimaginable 20 years ago. And there is some amazing work going on looking at timetabling and student centricity at some universities. And thanks to improvements in software, data is now available for modelling, but data is not information. And the student body are more willing now to feedback than ever before. So we shouldn't be scared about taking the data, talking to students about it and what they want, and moving forward with that. I mean, even if it's hybrid learning, blended learning, whatever you want to call it, if that is what they want and they are voting with their feet, then we need to adapt. And that will take considerable change. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
In that future focused context we've just been talking about, how do you see the professional roles in timetabling or teaching spaces evolving into the future? And what sort of skills do you think colleagues will require?
I would love to see that vision that I put to you earlier. Timetablers moving away from this data entry task to being specialist schedulers who have the time to work with departments, time to collaborate with the departments, plan their timetable, model the timetable, make it student and staff centric. That would be amazing. And I think people look at that like, oh, we can reduce the number of timetablers because they're not doing data entry anymore. No. There is a huge job for them to do. They just need to use the skills that they've got. So we don't need to reduce the number of timetablers. We need to fulfill their potential. And I would love, personally, to see universities gifting someone their teaching spaces to look after and manage, like UCL have done with me.
Finishing up our conversation today, you've clearly achieved a huge amount in your career so far. What motivates you to continue to work in HE?
Can I say the pension? No. I'm not wedded to HE, funnily enough. I'm values driven. I'm a values driven person. I need to be able to do stuff and I need to be able to feel like I'm needed. But at the moment, I love HE and this role is bringing me masses of fulfillment. So long may that continue.
Steph, thank you so much for sharing your reflections and for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me, Susanna.
Job Shadowing HE was written and presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more information about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.